Shalom! My name is Tzipora Cohen, and this is another Dvar Torah from Midreshet Emunah. As you may remember from last week's video, it did not exist, so allow me to fill you in for a moment. Yosef is now second to the king, the viceroy in Egypt, making him the second most powerful man in the world at this time. Because of his masterful planning, Egypt is living comfortably on a full stomach, while the rest of the world is beginning to succumb to hunger. The rest of Yosef's brothers have traveled down to Egypt in search of food. Yosef sees them and is immediately thrown back to that fateful day his brothers threw him down a pit and then sold him into slavery. He is unsure how to relate to them for his mistreatment at their hands. Are they worthy of his forgiveness? So he tests them by setting up Binyamin and waits to see what their reaction will be when he takes him as a slave for stealing his goblet. We're left on a cliffhanger. Will the brothers stand up for Binyamin? We open this week's Parsha with a heartfelt plea from Yehuda. He is begging Yosef, viceroy of Egypt, to let Binyamin free. He tried to get through to Yosef's heart by arousing compassion for his elderly father, who was waiting anxiously at home. He explains how out of his two beloved sons, born from his wife who had died, one of them had been killed, and the other was Binyamin, who Yosef was holding hostage. Should they return home without him, it would be the end of their father. Yosef, who was uncertain in the beginning, is incredibly moved by this and comes to see that the brothers seem to have done teshuvah and were not treating their father's other favorite, the remaining son of his beloved wife Rachel, in the way that they had treated him. He learns also that the rest of his family thought he was dead, and that's why they had ceased to look for him. It's kind of like that time that I started a game of hide and seek on a Shabbos afternoon and hid so well that after a few hours, my friends thought that I'd simply snuck out of the house and stopped looking for me. It was only after I revealed myself on Motzei Shabbos that they figured out where I had been the entire time. In any case, Yosef reveals himself to his brothers, and it says, "V'yetein et kolo bebechi v'yishmeu Mitzrayim." His sobs were so loud, the Egyptians could hear him. He tells his brothers not to worry about what had happened, because it was all part of God's plan that he would end up down there and be able to save their lives. But when Yosef says this, has he truly forgiven his brothers? Has telling them this sentence relieved their guilt? He gives them no responsibility for their actions by giving all responsibility to God. He doesn't even try to make them feel the slightest bit of remorse. He wants to make them feel better, but does it actually work? Life continues. Yosef provides for them, and they live in health throughout the rest of the famine. The brothers as a whole seem to continue living in harmony from this point on, that is, until Yaakov dies. As soon as he passes, the immediate next thing we hear is that the brothers come to Yosef begging for forgiveness once again. "Hinenu lach la'avodim," we are prepared to be your slaves. This entire time, the brothers had been living in apprehension. They were afraid that Yosef was only being nice to them because he didn't want to further upset their father. Yosef wept when his brothers told him this, and he realized that his forgiveness must not have been full. "V'atem cheshvim alai, ra'a Elokim, cheshva l'tova l'ma'an aseh ki yom hazeh le'yot imrav." Although you intended to harm me, God intended for it to be good, so it would bring about the survival of many people. Yosef finally gives them responsibility for causing him harm and promises again that he will take care of them and look after their families, and he does. This is a different kind of forgiveness. Instead of pretending it never happened, he acknowledges their actions and lets them know that he is still willing to forgive them. Originally, Yosef believed that it was either God's doing or his brother's fault for sending him to Egypt. But now he acknowledges the idea of double agency. The idea that God plans, but man plans as well, and both are responsible for the outcome of any given situation. By not acknowledging the brothers' actions, Yosef never gave them full closure on the situation, and it took a long time and much convincing for them to understand that Yosef truly harbored no more hate against them. Forgiveness in full requires not only the ability to overlook an event, but also to acknowledge that it happened. By not acknowledging their actions, Yosef was actually causing his brothers more harm than good. Forgiveness is never easy, but the only way to get through the river is to swim a little.
Wishing you and your families a Shabbat Shalom.